We're at a crossroad rather like 1929 was. In 1929, every company picked its own accounting principles and there were no auditors. And after the great crash of 1929, when we had 20% unemployment, similar to the situation now with COVID-19, investors sat up and said, "What, have we really been investing in companies without measuring their profit properly?" And in 1933, the US government took the lead and introduced generally accepted accounting principles and auditors. Now, some leaders at that time in representing views to Congress claimed that this would be the end of American capitalism, but in fact it was the way to deepening and broadening all our investment flows. And so today, similarly, I think investors are asking themselves, are we really investing in companies and only measuring their profit when they're causing massive environmental and social damage? We have to do the same thing for impact now that we did then for profit. We have to shift to generally accepted impact principles, which result in numbers that are audited, and that's happening now. So we have the means to do it. And for those of you who have got ventures, pick a major issue that you can contribute to, set impact objectives, and set the metrics for measuring your performance.
Great. And just a question on this, because I think there's also, in addition to the entrepreneurs and the investments that we've seen, having a system like this requires also a lot of buy-in, let's say from corporations, from governments, from other actors. And that's something that you talk a lot with in the book. Where do you see things today in terms of the visibility and the buy-in actually of large corporations and of governments that are also important players in this discussion?
So corporations are beginning to make the right noises. We saw a few months ago the Business Roundtable, which represents 160 of the biggest businesses in the United States, come out with a declaration that the world had shifted from just shareholder obligations to obligations to all stakeholders, suppliers, customers, employees, society, the environment, and so on. But most companies, Briera, don't really want to see that impact measured because they know that it is going to show some pluses and minuses, and some of the minuses are going to be very concerning for them in comparison with some of their competitors. So there are some enlightened business leaders, Emmanuel Faber of Danone, Paul Polman of Unilever, being two notable cases. But it's really investors now and consumers and talent that are going to encourage companies or even drive companies to measure their impact and manage their impact.
Yeah. And I want to take a look at the future, because this is also a huge part of what we look at in your book. Can you give everyone in the audience a bit of an idea of what is this future look like, the one that you see that we're heading toward today once we've gotten to this tipping point?
So I'd like to give you a couple of examples of how this change is going to come about and what it's going to lead to. I'm not in favor of investing in fossil fuels. I suspect many people in our audience aren't. But shouldn't we all know that ExxonMobil creates $39 billion of environmental damage a year through its operations alone, without taking into account the pollution that comes from the use of the oil that it gets out of the ground? And shouldn't we compare that with Shell, which creates 23 billion of damage, and BP, which creates 13 billion? Are these things not important in solving our environmental issues? Will investors not be influenced? Will consumers not be influenced by these figures? And if we look at the big problems we've seen in the United States because of racial discrimination and the inequality it has so massively created, which erupted in terrible violence after these horrible murders. Take companies and their employment. Take Intel, which has been one of the companies in the US that's made the biggest effort to increase diversity. If you look at its numbers, $7 billion are paid to its US 50,000 strong workforce a year. And we would all say, wow, that's an amazing social contribution. But if you compare the demographics around Intel's facilities with the representation within its hierarchy of people from minorities, and you add to that the monetary value of the salaries they would have made and the benefits they would have got, and you adjust for gender inequality and so on and so forth, the actual positive employment impact that Intel delivers is $2.5 billion, down from 7. Now, shouldn't we compare that with the same figures for other tech companies? Wouldn't it create a race to the top? And so the world that I think we are going to out of necessity, not out of choice, because there's no other way we can cope with our issues, is a world where we have transparency that enables us to make our consumption decisions, our employment decisions, our investment decisions, our decisions as businesses, our decisions as governments, or even as philanthropists, on the basis of measurable impact. And what that does is create a world where we have impact at the center of our economic system, alongside profit, keeping profit in check. And that will reduce inequality and regenerate our natural resources.
Okay, and I have a final question because I know that we're out of time now. On a spectrum, how far away are we, do you think, from reaching actually this vision that you're talking about?
So in this book, and today is publication date, so we're very, we're very privileged, if I can use the word, to be having this conversation. I really appreciate speaking to young entrepreneurs. I was 26 when I started my own business, so I feel very privileged to be here with you all. The recommendation I make is that within 2 years, businesses should start to report on their impact through impact-weighted financial accounts, and that governments need to mandate that now. If they do that, it'll be the watershed between the risk-return and the risk-return impact paradigm that I advocate in the book. Now, in 1929, it took 4 years to get to legislation. It depends on all of us in this call, how far we spread the word, how our consumption, our employment, our ventures help to move us forward down this line, how much we can influence the governments that lead us to do this. But I think it'll be time to get to mandating this, because there is no other way. Governments are going to emerge from this crisis with more debt than ever before. The number of unemployed is going to be back to Great Depression numbers. 40% perhaps of the unemployed will find it very difficult to get back to the jobs they had, because the companies that employed them have got used to operating on a slimmed down basis, and they want to hold on to these productivity gains. And the most vulnerable are going to be hit hardest again. The single families, the homeless, the disabled, the elderly. And so governments will need to bring entrepreneurship, innovation, and investment from the private sector to help us all cope with these challenges.
Great. Thank you very, very much for your time. Thank you for sharing the book with us. I was very lucky to have an early copy of this book, and honestly, I really would recommend everyone to go out and buy it. It is apparently available on amazon.co.uk. And it will be released in other languages over the coming months. So thank you very much for joining us and for your insights that you shared with us today.
Wish you all very good luck in developing your ventures. Bye.